Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Scrussy, and this is part 2 of the weapon procedural recoil system. So if you haven't watched part 1, I urge you to watch it. We don't actually set up any weapon recoil in that one. We simply are just setting up the project, setting up the IK hand, stuff like that. So we're just doing a full setup in that video. This one we're going to be going straight into the weapon recoil system and actually creating it. So let's go to our first person character. Okay, I'm going to get rid of these variables or these functions that we made. Let's just move all this. Okay, so what we want to do is, this is actually my line trace system that I made for the previous video, the line trace tutorial that I made. However, if you don't have a line trace yet, don't worry. This is simply going off a left mouse button debug. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to set this up. Okay, if you don't have this, I'll show you how to set it up in a certain way. So you want to go and do, preferably in your game, you want to have an IA_shoot. Okay, you want to set up actual proper inputs. You don't want to just use debug, but for this video, I'm just using debug. What we want to do is we want to set a timer because we want to test out how well this recoil system looks when we're actually spam firing it, when we're on auto fire. Okay, so that's why we're going to be setting up a timer. If you don't know what a timer is or anything like that, I strongly urge you to watch my previous videos about timers, or about timer. I think it's 2 videos ago, so go watch that. So what we're going to do is here, we are simply going to make a new event. I'm going to call that fire weapon. Okay. And then what we want to do is we want to create a new timer. We want to go set timer by event. So you can just go set timer by event like this. Okay. And we just want to set the looping to true and then set the time to 0.12. You can change it to whatever you want. Reason why I've chosen this is the nicest looking fire rate. This is simply your fire rate. Okay. This is how fast this is going to shoot. The lower the number, so if it's 0.01, so if we did something like this, 0.1, you see here if I shoot, you can see it's actually broken. It's just not even working because of how fast it's shooting. So let's go back to here, make it 0.12 or however fast you want it. If you want it to be at 0.2, have a slow fire rate, then you can do that. So once you do that and you have your fire weapon set up and you've plugged that into the event, you then want to go and create you want to put the press into the set timer because we want it to be when we press our mouse button, we want it to start this event and start spam shooting, start auto firing. And then when we release, we want to get a clear and invalidate timer by handle. Just connect that to the released and simply get the handle here from the return value of the timer and plug it in here. We can do this this way because then we don't have to create another variable. We can just simply plug this return value into here instead of making a whole new variable. And then what you want to do is you want to get another one called, or make another custom event. I've got this one called fire line trace, and that actually activates this. However, at the very end, I've got a trigger procedural recoil, and that goes down to my recoil system. So because if you don't have a line trace, then what you can do is you can simply make a trigger procedural recoil system or a recoil custom event, and then just go and type trigger procedural recoil, and then just replace that fire line trace with it. So then you can just plug both of these into here like that. Okay. But if you do have a line trace set up, then what you can do is you can have fire line trace. You can then have your fire line trace go into your line trace setup, and at the very end of your line trace you can then do the trigger procedural recoil, and that will trigger this. Okay, now the reason why we're plugging the set timer by event and the fire weapon into this is because what we want is that when we set the timer, so when we press it, we want to actually fire the line trace and we want to fire our procedural weapon recoil when we click it, and then every 0.12 seconds afterwards we want to repeat it. Because what happens if you don't do that and you shoot, you just try tap firing it, it's not going to work properly. You will have to set up a little bit of a system that still lets your fire rate, if you just tap fire it, the actual fire rate will be faster than your .12 if you can spam faster than that. So let's say you have a very fast or very slow shooting gun like a sniper, and it shoots 1 bullet every second. Then if you tap fire it, you'll be able to shoot all your bullets straight away. So you will have to implement some type of canned shooting boolean stuff like this in here if you want to have the exact same fire rate for when you just tap firing it. But I won't go into that now. Okay guys, so now we're going to get into the actual meat and potatoes of this whole system. So what are we doing here? So first of all, let's go into our procedural variables that I've made. So what we want is these variables here. We want our weapon target position, okay, or pos, and that's going to be basically where we want that's going to be the position that we want our gun to currently be in. So, or what the target is. So if we shoot, we want the target's position to be back. And then after it's finished, we want the target's position to be forward, and then we want it to be back a little bit and then back to normal, okay? The target rot is the same thing. That's just going to be our target rotation that we want our gun to move in. So, yeah, that's what we're trying to. Our target is what we're trying to move towards. We want our weapon recoil Y. And that's, again, like I said, we're not going to have X and Z just because of how janky it looks when you have that in a procedural recoil system. You then want your weapon recoil roll, pitch, and yaw. These will all be floats. Don't worry about range, that's for the line trace video. So you just need these. Again, because we're using rotation, we want the gun to move in all directions. It does look a lot more natural, but just for the position, we just want the Y. Okay, so what are we doing here? So what we're doing is, I'm going to explain this first, then we're going to start setting it up. So what we're doing is we're getting our weapon recoil Y, or all of our float variables, so weapon recoil roll, pitch, yaw, okay, and what we're doing is we're getting a random float in range, okay, and these variables here, or these values, they're the minimum and maximum values that the gun's going to rotate or move back in. And so the reason why I've set them up this way is these are just the values that I've found look nice right now, but you can finally tune them to make your procedural weapon recoil look a lot better. These are going to be how far your gun's going to move in a certain direction. So for my weapon recoil Y, I've got -3 for the min, and max is -2 because when you do negatives, you have it reversed. Minimum is going to be the highest and maximum will be the lowest. So basically for the Y, you don't want to be any positive numbers because that will make the gun go forward. You don't want it to have like a range like these two where this one's -2 and 2. Reason why is because you don't want the gun to be going back and then also be shooting forward and then shooting back again. That just looks very weird. You only want the gun every time you shoot. You want it to go back. That's it. You don't want it to go forward sometimes and then back and forth and then, yeah, you see what I mean. So this will be basically, I usually just do -3 and -2. Just because then that gives a little bit of variation, but it's still rough with the exact same amount of kickback. And these will be how far they will go. So the weapon recoil roll, I've done -2 and 2. That's just how far the gun's going to rotate back and forth towards you and downwards. And so the gun will sometimes shoot and recoil will kick it upwards a little bit, or sometimes it'll kick it downwards a bit. Usually you want it to be more on the upwards side. You can have this like, let's say 1 and 2 for the minimum. Stuff like that. Weapon recoil pitch, you can just follow these. Same thing with the yaw. The yaw, usually when I have the lowest, I usually have it under, like below 1, because it looks a little bit unnatural still, but it does add a nice touch when you have it on a very low number. So what we're doing is here, we're simply, every time we shoot this trigger procedural recoil, we are simply firing all these off and we are setting all of them. These will be the values that we want our gun to move towards. We don't want them here because this is on update. So what's going to happen is every time you shoot your gun, it's going to constantly change the values. Where here you're changing the values once, you're shooting the gun, and then it'll change the values again, and then it'll shoot the gun again. Where if you have these in here, it will constantly update, and it'll just basically look very janky or start shaking crazy. It'll look very, very weird. Then what you want to do is in your procedural recoil timeline. So you want to create a timeline, timeline like this, and this you want to call procedural recoil _TL, which stands for timeline. Okay. Actually, what I'll do is I'll open that back up, and then I'll show you how to set it up. So I'm going to click on here, and I've set my timeline to 0.4 because that's how, if you go to your curves, they end at 0.4. Okay, if you want them to last a little bit longer or a little bit shorter, make sure that both curves are the same, end at the same point. So if you want to make your shooting faster, or just the shooting time frame shorter or longer, you can make it 0.6, 0.5, whatever you want. Just make sure that both curves end at that value. And then what you do is you go, make sure you go use glass keyframe, enable that. And that's basically going to make sure that it's going to use the last keyframe value of the timeline. You want to then go add float track, okay? Because remember, we created it for our position. We created a float track, or a float curve. Call this whatever you want. You can just call this like procedural pos, or I just called it Y because there's only one one axis. And then you want to go to your external curve, click that, and you can see we've got it here, procedural recoil Y, and that's already set up. See? So now we don't have to do anything. We've already got a curve in here. Same thing here. We want to go add vector track now. We don't want to add float because we have a vector for our rotation. Call it whatever you want, and then go here and choose your C underscore procedural recoil rod. And see, now we've got that all set up. Now what will happen is if we close that, you'll see we've got our procedural recoil Y, and then we've got our track. Okay, I called it procedural recoil rot. So what you want to do is you want to then go split struct pin, and that will get all the three values, and then you'll have it set up just like this. Okay, awesome. So now what we want to do is we then want to lerp. So the lerp is basically going to go from 0 to whatever our weapon recoil value is. So you remember how we set up these random values? This is where these come in. So what we're doing is we're going, hey, let's get this for the position. We want to get our weapon recoil Y, okay? And that's going to be in our B, okay? Because what we're doing is we're going from 0, and that's just our normal resting pose. We want to go from 0 to our target, which is B, okay? And that's going to be based on our alpha. We want to plug our procedural recoil Y into the alpha like that. And the reason why is because what's going to happen is when we shoot our gun, if we go back into here, up here is going to be 1. So what's going to happen is that's going to be, we go back to here, 1 is the value of B. That's the alpha. So 0.5 is going to be between A and B. And let's say the value is 5 for B and 0 for A. The middle value, let's say the alpha is at 0.5, the value that we get out of this will be 2.5, if that makes sense. So if you're going to here, what's going to happen is that when we shoot our gun, it's going to go up, it's going to go to the value of B, and then it's going to go back down to the value of 0. Or actually below that, it's going to go to -0 and then back here to 0. Same thing with these, it's going to go up to our random value that we made, and then back down a little bit past 0 and then back in. And that's how it works. And then what I do is I just put them under here like this, okay? And then we want to just plug that return value into our target position Y, okay? Because we just want our back and forth position to be changed. We don't want X and Z to be changed at all. So when you get your target position, you set it, just go right click and split that struct pin. And then you can just plug that value straight into the Y, because that is our Y position that we're getting out. Now for the rotation, it's the exact same deal as this. I know it looks a lot more, but it's just because there's more values that we're using, but it's the same principle. All we're doing is we're going and getting our X rotation, and remember in my variables tutorial, we spoke about it, but X is roll, Y is pitch, and Z is yaw, okay? So what we do is we do the same thing here. So we go from our X, okay? And I might actually move these so they're a little bit easier to see where they're going. So you can see we go from our X all the way into our alpha, and that's going to be determining if we're going to be at value A, which is 0, or value B, which is going to be our weapon recoil roll, which we set over here. That's, again, our random value that we set. Okay, then we plug that return value into the rotation X. Remember, you can just go to here, we set it, you can just go split strike pin, the exact same thing, except we're using all the values. So after you do that, you just do the exact same for these ones. So recoil pitch, you want to do the same thing. So lerp, get your recoil Y, plug that into the alpha, get your recoil pitch, plug that into B, get the return value and put that into Y. And same thing for the yaw. The yaw will be plugged into Z and get the Z alpha into here and weapon recoil yaw. Okay guys, so that will be for part 2 because we are hitting the 15-minute mark. So I'm going to end it here and we'll go on to part 3, okay? So I hope that was not too much. We did do a lot of stuff here. Hopefully I explained it quite well, but it is a lot to explain. Yeah, it is a lot to try and explain what's really happening in a fast time frame. So see you guys in the next one.